listening to Season 1, Episode 21 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Remember, life is the space between our things.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I am your host and carefully formatted text block of narrative roleplay, Adam.
I'm your melodramatic entrance pose, Sarah.
And I'm your clue that is repeatedly overlooked by the party, Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being on the show today. Great to have you on. You know, in our group, we're lucky we get to sit down with each other every week, whether that's virtually now, but hopefully for real soon. And we get to play this game that we all love. Some of us even play multiple times a week. For other groups out there, scheduling conflicts can sometimes mean sessions only once or twice a month, if not less. So what to do in between times? How do you extend this fun of a session through the following days or weeks until the next session arrives? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, between session RP. Now, Anthony, our group has gone back and forth in terms of our commitment to between session RP, but can you pick out a time where it worked really well for you?
Yeah, early on, I guess in our first 9 months or so of our first season, I mean, everyone in our group was extremely good at RP. And so between live sessions, we would go onto Slack and kind of coded a couple Slack bots so you could represent NPCs if you wanted to, and basically just build an entire world online. So it's kind of like reading a book versus watching a movie. I mean, you can see the same 10-second scene play out in a movie and miss all the fine details that you capture in a book. So it was great having players just kind of wander around town and get into random chaos and getting captured repeatedly and just having all sorts of insane stuff going on.
Poor Nick.
Exactly.
No, and it was a ton of fun, and you mentioned those bots that you used within Slack. For those listening, basically Anthony set up this thing where we could have any amount of NPCs, and there was a portrait assigned to each one, and we could speak in the voice of that NPC just by using some code within Slack. And it was really interesting. Sarah, in terms of that in-between session role play, when did it work or feel best for you?
Definitely during that first 9 months is where everything was really, really taking off, and we were still kind of getting to know each other as players, and I just found it was an awesome way to sort of explore facets of the character in the context of going up against other characters, kind of being sharpened by each other. Brooke became my character's best friend through some offline RP, and Tom is, not always, he was very anxious. He self-admits, very anxious during, at first, especially in live RP. And then we just became like best friends in character offline. And it was really, really cool to see. And you get sort of this, these nuances that sort of come out, especially history for the character, like cultural things that might have impacted them. And you can learn a little bit more about them. And I absolutely love that. Plus the world, we got to explore Anthony's world in a way that you don't get the time to do when you're at a table. And that requires Anthony being present in a lot of cases. But it was a lot of fun. It added so much richness to the story for me.
Yeah. And in some cases, I mean, I didn't even have to be present. Like when we were in Blue Bluff, we had basically pulled out a town map with 22 locations. I had no idea what those things were. And I just said, hey, have at it. So like I would ping Adam, say, oh, Sarah's going to the music shop. Can you run this thing? And he said, Adam came up with a character and just ran the music shop.
Yeah, and that was a really interesting way of dealing with it too for any groups out there trying to do between session RP. A DM might look at that and be like, "Oh man, I do so much prep work. I don't have time to be on this, 24/7, Anthony did a great thing, and he basically assigned each of us as a DM of a certain area within the town. And that way, if there were a couple players heading somewhere, he could just message us and say, "Hey, these two people are going to your location. I'll create a channel, and you take over basically DMing." And the unspoken or spoken, I can't remember if you actually wrote it down, but the general rule was, hey, don't be a jerk. Yeah, yes, you're kind of subbing in as a DM, but try not to alter the entire universe in the process. You just
Yeah.
kind of take them through a scene and try not to kill anybody, and that's about it. And it was a lot of fun, and it gave other players a chance to dip their toe in the DM water, and it gave Anthony enough breathing space to be able to not only prep, but also keep an eye on everything. It worked really well. I don't know how we kind of fell into it, but boy, like we really fell into it well.
Yeah, and Anthony, when we were playing really, really like hot and heavy in the first 9 months online, what was it like for you as a DM? Like, did you enjoy it? Was it like watching the story play out, or was it more draining for you to kind of be in attendance? Because I think you still had to be like the big eye in the sky in a lot of the scenes, especially if you wanted an NPC to kind of help us understand a little bit more of the world.
Yeah, no, it was a ton of fun, and it was also a ton of work. I mean, I was probably doing it like 20 hours a week or so, because I was in pretty much every channel. Even if I wasn't speaking, I was like reading all the messages, and like for example, there was two characters that went skinny dipping, and so they were having some fun RP,
Oh God.
and then just basically throw in some monsters or throw in something that's happening, and just to give them something to react to. So there was all sorts of weird things going on.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But enough about that. Let's get into some questions for the week. Our first post comes from Reddit user Zarish9, who asks, should in-between session roleplay be optional or required? What works best? I've heard that some DMs give players RP homework assignments between sessions and require them to report what their character is thinking, feeling, planning, or doing between sessions at the beginning of the next session. While I like to make no requirements but give players options to do all kinds of role play in between sessions, what do you think is better? So, Sarah, we'll turn to you first. Should Zarish require their players to do RP homework assignments?
No, you should never require. I mean, everyone's schedule is going to be different, and their comfort with like the written word or however else you are, debuting this offline RP is going to, vary. So you definitely want to customize it for your characters. I do think though that there is a lot of value to it, in helping your characters stay immersed in that world and in the characters, so that when they come back to the table, especially if it's bi-weekly sort of gaming night, you definitely have like more context for them to remember their what they were doing and what their relationships were and who the characters were mad at. And sometimes you can lose that if it's been 2 weeks and you're like, oh yeah, where was I? So yeah, I don't think you should require it, but I definitely think it's a powerful option if your players are into it.
Oh, that's true. Like I gotta agree with you there that having something required, don't lose sight that this is a game that we play for fun, and there might be some people out there who enjoy homework. I know I never did my entire school career, and I don't like to mix work with pleasure. I get a lot of fun, and most likely people are going to do the between session, role play homework, but to require it, that's a little dicey. How about you, Anthony? Do you agree, or do you think there should be some requirements set forth?
No, I personally just leave it open. It's just throw out some questions like, hey, if anyone wants to give me some more backstory, or can I send you some questions about your character, and you can message me back if you have time, or if something comes to you later. And 9 times out of 10, people will respond back with more ideas, and we'll throw them back and forth online. But I mean, if we had some people in our group that didn't really do offline stuff, and that was totally fine.
Yeah, and I would say everyone in our group now, our group has gotten along really well, and we have a tendency to be excited about this kind of stuff anyway. But I remember when both you and Steve were asking for character knives, or basically background plot hooks, in essence, things about our characters that are interesting that the DM could maybe potentially use at some point. And I mean, I'm a procrastinator, so I took a while, but I think all of us got back to you with some character knives, and I don't think you missed one, right?
Yeah, no, I think everybody gave them, and I was able to kind of weave them into the world or spawn some new NPCs that were related and tie stuff together. So it was definitely a big help.
Yeah, it sounds like we're kind of in agreement here that the requirement part kind of rubs us all the wrong way. I don't like being told what to do. I'm sure a lot of other people don't like it, and just this idea that you also kind of get into some gray areas of a DM being a bit too, I don't know what the word is, like controlling, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, this is a game. Like, yeah, the DM can ask, hey, what do you want to do, and what about your character? And we're still doing this for fun, and throwing that requirement on there, I think, diminishes that fun. But that's just our opinion. Hopefully you find what works for you. It sounds like you're doing the optional route, which is what we would suggest, and would love to hear how your group is doing with their in between session RP homework, Zorish. So good luck out there.
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Did offline RP ever inspire something in your character that you hadn't anticipated, or for you, Anthony, inspired you to weave something into the bigger narrative because something a character was doing or a couple characters seemed really interested in?
Oh, considering you burned down half of Bleep Left, that definitely had some impact. Yeah, no, there was a lot of stuff that happened offline that definitely became canon in the main plot. So they had to catch some people up, but yeah, there was a ton of stuff I can think of.
Yeah, and I'm thinking just in terms of the different conversations that my character had with others, bled out into the weekly gameplay that we got into as well. So, and gave me a better understanding of which direction. I know, Anthony, when you and I talked about what my character was going to be, it wasn't too far off from what it ended up being, but it definitely shifted to this more protective nature, and loneliness around this character that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
present in the initial build. And the
Right.
reason that came along was because of my interactions with Sarah's character and Tom's character, and others, and Steve's and Nick's. Like, it bred this kind of personality that I had no idea it would be at the start. And that's the beauty of it, is because you can get really attached to this character that you've made, and you want to dig deeper. You want to figure out more about this person, and then role play that. So it's really an awesome way to handle things. And I couldn't recommend it more highly, to do that in between session RP.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News. So this has been something that's been out for a bit, but we haven't talked about it yet. It's called D&D Celebration 2020. It's an event being put out by Wizards, and it's billed to be the largest virtual game of D&D ever played. There's a piece over at Polygon by Jeffrey Parkin titled "How to Take Part in the Biggest D&D Game Ever," and it gives a breakdown of what's going to happen at D&D Celebration 2020. So basically, Adventurers League is going to be running something like 200 simultaneous tables using adventures from the new Rime of the Frost Maiden, which comes out September 15th. Just imagine thousands of players playing the same adventure all at the same time. It's pretty mind-blowing. And in addition to the games, there will be a bunch of panels and famous people and all that stuff. So, Anthony, what do you think about this event? Do you plan on watching or even participating in any of it?
Yeah, I think I might pop in, maybe pick 2 or 3 and kind of jump between them just to see how people are handling the same situation differently and see how people are kind of RPing the new material. But it sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really does. Sarah, does this pique your interest at all?
It does. And I probably won't watch the people playing. But what I wanna hear are the panelists talk about, especially with the design. I didn't even know what some of the options were until I looked at the schedule, and there's some really, really cool sort of subjects that they're gonna cover, and I'm like, wow, I really might I need to listen to this. So yeah, I'm excited. If I have time, I'd pop in and watch everyone play Rime of the Frost Maiden. That's for sure. Super excited about that coming out.
Yeah, it's coming out. If you're listening to this episode when it comes out, then it'll be out tomorrow. So yeah, like this kind of northern adventure, Sarah. It sounds like you're pretty hyped up for it.
I want to play a druid from the north. I just think that would be so epic. I don't know. It just like to turn into a seal. I mean, come on, let's do this. We don't really get the chance to play a seal or polar bear down, where we usually play. So I'm just excited about the new landscape and all the ways in which people's different abilities will be able to shine.
Yeah, I love the northern realm, if you will, and it's really neat to see them expand on it. Now, Anthony, I know you and Sarah weren't on last week's show where we talked a little bit about Rime of the Frost Maiden, but are you excited for what's coming out?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been kind of a horror guy, so I'm hoping that they have some interesting new rules, or maybe around stress or sanity or something like that, because the madness rules are a little weak
Mm.
right now.
Yeah, it's neat to see them expand on those base rules more and more. Bringing a bit more flavor, a bit more depth to the game, and in addition to them playing Rime of the Frost Maiden at this event, they're also going to have some preview content from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which also excited about. And the interesting thing about these games that are being played is apparently the outcome of those games at all those different tables will have an impact on the overall story, which is I'm not sure how they're going to go about doing that, but it's basically going to weave together in this larger meta narrative that Adventure League is running. So should be pretty
Mm.
interesting to see. If you are interested in playing one of those games, they are ticketed and they're $5 to play the game for Friday or Sunday. It looks like, and $10 for the Saturday games. But the fee is going to be donated to Extra Life. So if you're looking for it to go to a good cause, at least that money's going to Extra Life and not into some bank account somewhere for some executives. So at least we got that going there. So check it out if you're interested. That it runs from September 18th and runs for 3 days. We'll have the event link in the show notes, and I'm really curious to see how this goes, how well it does. But in the meantime, we're going to step out for just a moment, but stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D, and they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons and Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user Riza99, who asks, is it okay to plan between sessions? Or is it metagaming? We recently had some group texting among the PCs. One player abstained from participating, and at the beginning of the next session, when it came around to implementing the plan, he did something completely different than what was discussed. In the end, we were successful in the challenge, but it was an interesting turn of events. I get the impression that he, usually a DM, feels it's metagaming to plan outside of the game. Just looking for others' opinions on this. All right, Sarah. So would you classify planning between sessions as metagaming?
Yeah, there's a couple of situations where I would, and then there's a situation where I wouldn't. So if you are talking out of character about a strategy, that's definitely metagaming. If you were like frozen in time and DM's like, okay, we're gonna pause here and we'll continue next week, and you're about to like fight something that just popped up or something like that, and you really would only have 6 seconds for your character to respond, but you spend a whole week talking about what you're going to do, that's definitely metagaming as well. But if you're like in a tavern and you are in character and you're talking about a strategy for how you're going to bust into that castle and, you know, slay a few bad guys and, you know, rescue the jewels or whatever it is that your objective is, I think that's fine. Stay in character, discuss the strategy as those characters, and don't bring in anything that your character wouldn't know. Then it's not metagaming. But beyond that, I believe, yeah, it is. What do you think,
Okay.
Anthony?
Yeah, I'd kind of agree. If they pause in the heat of combat, I would pause the conversation as well. But if the characters are sitting around a campfire and figuring out how to slay this giant animated roast creature that is roaming the countryside, then not that that's ever happened offline.
Random example.
Random example, yes. Then no, I don't consider it, because obviously there's some level of conversation that's happening in real life that's not happening at the table, just because 3/4 of the table was combat. So everything else has got to happen somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, I admit when I first read this question, I was like, so they're talking in between sessions, no biggie. But the more I read this question, the more I'm leaning towards, yes, it is metagaming if you're talking about basically this plan. It almost sounds like it was combat related. It was, something they were going to try, and it doesn't. Yeah, it depends on what voice you're using. Like it says, it was a group text that they were in, texting back and forth, and one person wasn't participating. That kind of tells me you probably weren't talking in the character voice. You were saying, "All right, guys, we're going to face, X, Y, and Z. Make, what do you think we should do? Well, I'll lead with this, and you come in with that." That is metagaming. If you were speaking in character voice and talking to the other players in that voice and determining a plan, that's different. Also, it depends on when this game was paused. Like you said, Anthony, if this game stopped for some reason mid-combat, remember, each round is 6 seconds. So you have 6 seconds of thought behind what's going on. You're probably not going to be able to do much planning, even in a player voice, when it comes to that. So I think it sounds like we're all on the same page here, Riza. It's basically metagaming if you're doing that, unless you're speaking in character voice around a campfire or something like that. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what we're thinking about it. Would love to hear more about the situation that this is, because we certainly might be misunderstanding kind of what was going on there, just to figure out, okay, what was actually being said and in what way. But regardless, best of luck out there. Hope you're enjoying the game that you're in. Right now, though, we're going to get into another segment. When we're creating ways to keep players engaged between sessions, it can be frustrating and it can be a difficult endeavor. So let's see if we can design our own between session plan in our long-running segment. Let's build something. Welcome to Let's Build Something, where we get to put our creativity to the test and build something live for all the world to hear. In this week's segment, we're going to build ourselves some custom between session play. So here's how it'll work. We're each going to roll dice on the table that determines the characteristics of our group. Once we have those parameters, we're going to design some between session play that would work best for that group. So let's get rolling here. You guys ready?
Yes.
So what I want you guys to do is grab 4d4, and we're going to roll on this table here. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and roll your dice.
Grab my calculator.
All right.
All right, so we'll start. Anthony, what'd you roll?
I have 2-1-1-2.
Okay, so you're going to be describing between session RP play for a group that does kind of soft role play, who are college students, who have high enthusiasm for online play, and who are confident in boundaries in terms of not pushing into areas that are not appropriate. So sounds like you kind of have a dream group there.
Hey.
Sarah, what'd you end up rolling?
4, 2, 3, and then I can't read this one. Hang on. It's 1.
Okay, so you got a hack and slash group, fun, who are busy professionals, who have low enthusiasm for online RP, and who also struggle with boundaries. So yes, well, this is a dream group as well. Let's see. I rolled a 2-1-2-1, so I have soft RP like Anthony. I am dealing with college students like Anthony, except the enthusiasm level's a little lower. It's medium level, and they struggle with boundaries. So, Anthony, let's turn to you first. So, what kind of we call it offline. I guess it's online, but offline meaning outside of the session. What kind of in between session RP are you going to run for your group?
Yeah, so I don't see any reason why I wouldn't go with what we've already been doing. So I'd probably set up Slack, uh, and set them up into some kind of situation where they have some level of freedom, like maybe they're in a small hamlet or something. Create a couple things to do in town, like I don't know, a pie eating contest going on, and some problems with rats in the tavern because you always have to have that, and
Absolutely.
and a couple mysteries around town. Just maybe not even have a pure plot direction set out, but just something to do, and just drop them in the world or drop them in a tavern and kind of see what happens. And probably just to get the ball rolling, they'll need to be nudged a little bit. So probably have an NPC walk over and talk to them, or kind of have the world interact with them. But then they'll start to get the idea and hopefully take it from there.
Yeah, it sounds like with the soft RP aspect, they're enthusiastic but might not know how to jump right in. So I
Right.
think you're right. You're going to have to prod them here and there. Let's turn over to you, Sarah, with your nightmare group. What are you going to do to get any kind of in between session RP out of this group?
So this is what I think I do. So they're hack and slash busy professionals. They have low enthusiasm for online RP, and then they struggle with boundaries. So I think what I would do is probably set up on Discord and let them know that I will probably have a monster show up maybe once a week, and they are welcome to join if they want, but it's not a requirement because they are busy professionals. I use Avre. So they could import their D&D characters and kind of use the functions that are provided by Avre, and maybe just get to do some light play while they are busy at work. But I could at least set up the scene, maybe introduce some new characters, but keep it at like a comic book level of like description and dialogue, if at all, so that it's just easy, it's bite size, and it kind of and then I would have a lot of hopefully control over the scene if boundaries become an issue. So
yeah, that sounds like a good way to go, and especially you're almost it almost sounds like you're describing a WoW event. Where
keep them in
like,
a dungeon.
Yeah. Keep them. Hey, one day this week, this is going to pop up, and you guys are, going to be involved and fight and whatever, and keeping it like that. It very much gives me MMO feels there, which I think would work perfectly for a group like that. I think that's a great recommendation. Looking at mine, it's going to be somewhat similar to Anthony's because a couple of the demographics are the same, and I am leaning leaning towards the Slack route on this for a couple reasons. Number one, because they're college students, they probably have a lot more time than other people and can get a little deeper. I think Discord works really well for those who just need to pop in quick and pop out. But specifically because of the admin privileges and the ability to see things that I can create these channels that oversee some of this stuff, because since they are struggling with boundaries, we're going to veer into areas that need to be I'm going to feel like a parent or like a police officer in this scenario, because your college students who can't who struggle with boundaries, that's going to be a nightmare. You're going to have to be in there trying to say, no, you can't have sex with that, I'm sorry, you have to role play normal.
Barmaid's all booked up.
yeah it's that's going to happen. So I'd say around that, since their interest level's a little low, what I would probably do is just maybe focus on a few of them a week and pull them into because again, this is soft RP, so they're probably not going to be proactive in it. So maybe select a couple players and kind of force them into a situation that they can react to, and maybe do that a couple times a week. I think a lot of my time would be eaten up by babysitting them, but I think that might be a good route to go. So that hopefully gives listeners an idea of kind of how you can react differently depending on your group. A lot of the advice that comes out is based on that person's own experience, and they might have an amazing group with all these things that you'd love your group to be, but that's just not what you have. Doesn't mean your group's bad, it's just different. And you just might need a little bit different of approach, and hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can adapt your approach to fit the group that you have. Now,
can I throw a curveball on this?
Yes,
I have a curve question. So you are DMing and you have these same groups, and then you find out that one of your players is having a really, really bad time at work or either at home, and they just need to escape. And so would you adjust like any of what you're doing for that particular player? Like would you ever use it as a way to help them escape or feel empowered or that kind of thing?
I think it depends on whose group we're talking about. If it was Anthony's style of group that in terms of the demographics that we mentioned, then yes. In my demographic or yours, Sarah, I'd be a little cautious just because of that boundary issue. It's one thing to say, yeah, sure, like I'm going to pay a bit more attention to this person. They're going through a tough time. They want to kind of escape things. Okay, great. Yeah, I'll engage. But if you know this group to be a little unhealthy in that regard, it might be short-lived. I think in general, in terms of like a group like ours, the nice thing about working within Slack or something similar, more than something like Discord, is because of those different channels and private channels, you can get into the role play with people without making others feel like they're being left out of something. And I think that's important, that if you're showing a lot of attention to one player for a reason like you just mentioned, Sarah, then maybe it might be better to have that a bit more private so the others aren't seeing everything that's going on. I don't know how you feel about that, Anthony.
Yeah. And I think if you feel like you want to pay a little bit more attention to players, everybody has some kind of scene that is probably their favorite scene, and it can vary drastically by players. I mean, some people want like a temple of intrigue and other things, and other people want to basically be Rambo stranded on an island, and which we've actually RP'd pretty well.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of one other question that kind of popped up in my head here, because in our group, we've kind of stepped away from the between session RP. We do get together every week, and I think it's a combination of different factors in terms of our own schedules and just kind of how we're doing things and how well we know each other. It's a little easier to RP in session now because we're that comfortable with each other. But do you guys miss the level of Slack engagement there was between sessions?
Yeah, honestly, I personally do. And I think some of it was like we were newer then, and so the rules weren't as heavy of a focus. Like we were still kind of discovering them. So it's like when you have this, when you're new to D&D, you're just kind of making stuff up as you go. And it's, I feel like sometimes we're hamstrung by the rules a little bit. So
Mm,
just that creative freedom and just making stuff up as you go was really fun.
sure. Well, how about you, Sarah?
Oh, I love it. I would totally do it like right now. I think that the newness probably was a driving factor because it was really like a novelty when we first started playing. But I still think it has so much value. I would just love just even now in the game that you're running, just to have our characters in that inn, getting to know, some each other and learning just like I don't know, that slice of life kind of a glance at this party and how it's starting to gel. And I would also there are also I think there is also value in the sense that if you can sort of single out a character and give them a little bit of extra attention, but do it with each character in a very metered way so that as a DM you don't get overwhelmed, you can actually sort of see yourself kind of helping shape that character. And I think there's a lot of
Hmm.
fun when your character starts to change because of events. Like I if I'd gotten any one of your groups, I would want to just like take each character before we started our first game, and just do like a little mini sort of background scene with you, like where you came from, your parents, what was that crucial moment that made you decide to kind of go off on this adventure or that changed your life, right? Like, was your family slaughtered? Was it, a fire? Did you run away? Or is their family still out there and you're just really happy, but there was an opportunity for adventure and to get away from that life? But like, I kind of like exploring that. So you get a sense of your home and your background too that you can carry with the character. So you don't have to always think it up yourself. You can kind of play off of other people who would have been there. So I don't know. I enjoy doing that because it feels like it's filling in a lot of the world at a very local level for the character.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of something that we did heavily in Stevens 1. Like when we started with everybody, we came up with a pretty complex backstory for each character. We just went back and forth, and I gave them a lot of details about their history once they kind of gave me where they wanted to go. But I tied everybody's histories together at multiple points. So, like if you were a tiefling and you basically survived the purge of these paladins, well, you might find out if you, the paladin character, you were a part of that purge.
Yeah,
And
I
basically set up
remember
all these
that.
different knives and then basically just kind of threw all these characters into the room together. And so as they were discussing their backstories, then they said, "Oh, you're the one who actually killed my parents."
Yeah.
And just see what
Yeah, those are
happens.
great reveals, especially when it's just within the group. I love that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I agree with you guys. I do miss it a lot. I hope that we can figure out a way to get back into it. Certainly, probably some of my favorite memories are sitting up late on Slack, typing out messages in a little halfling voice. Mostly cursing Sarah's character for something she said or did. So regardless, let's get into the last post this week. This comes from Reddit user Chef Patrick, who asks, between session RP. So I run 2 games and each have Discord groups. I always like to drop a little bit of info or scenario setup between sessions. If our session is on a Thursday, then Monday night I might tell the group about a letter they received while doing their long rest at the inn, or a foretelling dream what that one of them has. I find it helps bridge the gap from one session to the next and get the players wanting to jump right in at the beginning of the session to deal with whatever occurred since their players last had a chance to interact. Does anyone else utilize this or any other means of engaging your players between sessions? Now, Anthony, we talked a little bit about this already. Yeah, I want to drill down on this a little bit. Like, are there specific things that you do to try to draw a player out between session? Is there a technique that you use that maybe some others might be able to use as well?
Well, in our case, the offline area was really just a space to kind of sit around the campfire and just kind of talk and get into character and maybe have a little side quest or so, like have an owlbear pop up in the woods or something. Um, earlier on when we were in Blee Bluff or riding on a ship somewhere, the offline RP started to kind of take off and actually drive some of the main plot to some degree, or at least kind of change where the future stuff was going. I can certainly see like dropping hints and that kind of stuff being a factor. I just wonder, like, would players want to start interacting with that, and how much would that affect the world? So, like, if you are heading to a village to investigate some kind of, like, everybody's turned to stone or something, and then you kind of forecast having some individual stagger out of that village and let the players talk to that person as a clue giver. That could be some kind of interesting thing that comes from it, and maybe some of their decisions that they make in that offline RP, maybe they decide to bring that person back, maybe they interrogate that person, maybe I don't know, maybe they give some of their supplies to them. It might just give them a small space to interact with what's coming up.
Yeah, and just like looking through Chef Patrick's question here, I think there's some confusing terminology here. It's not so much in between session RP as he's giving little like tidbits of information that they can act on in session. But I like the route that you go with it in terms of letting them interact with something between session. It doesn't just have to be, oh, here's this piece of information a couple days early. That way they're kind of chomping at the bit whenever the session comes around. But actually engaging them in an interaction of some kind. What do you think on that, Sarah?
I think that both serve terrific purposes. Like, if you can hook people and get them excited for the next session, I think that's great. And if you can give them more context about the world and their characters, or a little, maybe a ethical challenge or something that's gonna help them get to know their character better, and or maybe even put some sort of shadow in the future of that character because of a decision they made, I think that's also great. That both are gonna get the players to lean in. It's just a matter of how you want them to lean in, if that makes sense, and how much they want to be engaged in the level of detail as well. So
Yeah, and just kind of thinking back, I think my favorite way of engaging a player, especially since it doesn't actually require them to do anything, Anthony, whenever we visited Blee Bluff and you had that map of those 22 locations, I think that's such a good route to go, because what you did was you just put that out in front of us. And there were some of us who didn't go anywhere, or those who didn't want to engage in the online between session RP and stuff like that, and that was fine. That didn't affect anything. But then there were others who, I remember I was a little bored the one night, and I had seen other people doing something. I'm like, oh, I'll jump in on this. I said, Anthony, I think I'm going to head over to marker number 4 or whatever, and he dumped me into a channel. And it was a small scene, but it was perfect. It was almost like being in a text-based mud, walk west, and you see a forest in front of you, kind of stuff. And it was really a neat experience that I felt as a player. I was kind of driving the pace of it instead of the DM. I could do it at my leisure. If I took 5 hours to respond to Anthony, he wasn't being like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? It was slow paced. I could dig into things. And especially once we incorporated, a couple more people, like having that other person there to engage as well alongside, such a neat way to get us excited for the next week. And I would really suggest that as a method, that if you're in a location that allows you to do that, have them go somewhere between session instead of just waiting until the session to occur before they can go there. You might be surprised by what comes out of it. But that being said, I think that's going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacripg.com. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG Podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/Potomac RPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Sarah and Anthony. Really appreciate it. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG Podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Anthony.
Until next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
never stop roleplaying. this would probably generally not be okay if you hadn't been, dating the person for 4 years.